The fog of ownership. There's this sense of ownership in this culture. It is taken for granted. It's a sort of a underlying fact of our culture that there is this sort of right of ownership, that we can own our house, own our car, and so on. And so the sense of that is that I, the separate organism here, has a right to control, have use of something else. Let's just take something simple to start with, like a car. So we can have the sense of, I have a car, I have this particular car, I have the right to use it as I wish. So it feels like I control that, I control that object. But in some sense, there's also another movement there, that the object has some reflection back to me, or so it can seem. In other words, depending on what the car model and make, and what I see myself as a person, and it's how it reflects on me. If it's nice fancy car, then that reflects something about who I am, right? So I'm not saying that if you have a particular job that requires a nice car, let's say you're a real estate salesperson, you need a nice car to drive people around. That's fine. It's just part of the game. But I'm just talking about the sense of how much of our relationship with that car is a function of how my sense of self-worth, my self-image is related to or identified with a particular object that I consider that I own. Okay. All right, so one more mundane example, and then we'll move on. But fashion, clothes that we wear, our appearance, right? Nothing wrong, right? Expressing our personal individuality, beautiful, no problem. And then there's just this subtle, or maybe not so subtle, movement where what I appear as is who I am. In other words, it's no longer am I just the owner of these clothes and this hairdo and this grooming and so on. It is defines what I am. That's who I take myself to be, this appearance. And so it's no longer just a one-way control of a certain object that I may happen to own. It is the object owns me. The object defines me. And so, we can just sense into that. Again, there's nothing wrong with wearing whatever you like to wear and enjoying that expression, beautiful. But also just notice the degree to which we are identified with our appearance. Okay, simple enough. So let's move a little closer to the home. Let's talk about this body-mind organism. So we talk about it as, I have a body, right? We say, I have a bellyache, or I have a sore toe. We don't say, I am a bellyache, or I am a sore toe. There's sort of a level of ownership looking at this organism. And so even though we believe that we have some control over this organism, the identity doesn't seem to be housed in the body itself. So what we're looking for here is, where's this level of identity housed? Where's command central? And so we can pretty easily narrow that down to some concept, some belief, some way we hold ourselves in our imagination and our conceptual thinking about this body. So, in some sense, we believe that we sort of are in charge. I can have a thought to get up and walk to the refrigerator and get something to eat. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the body complies. So, in that sense, it's sort of a useful object that's responsive to what I want. So, in that sense, it's we're reasonably happy with that situation. But then sometimes the roles are reversed. Sometimes the body gets sick. Sometimes it hurts itself. Sometimes it's emotionally abused, and then we discover that we're not entirely in control. That there's some feedback going on that affects how we feel about the body, or how I feel about whatever I take myself to be, and it becomes a little more blurred about exactly what it is that I do take myself to be. But then, by and large, there's this sense, as we go back to more and more subtle levels, the next level might be, well, what I am, what I take myself to be, is what my mind tells me. What my mind tells me that I believe, in whatever that is. And again, there's no problem in having a reasonable sense of self-worth and confidence and so on. Helps us function well in the world. But then the degree to which we feel like we need to defend our thoughts and beliefs and opinions is indicative of how strongly we believe them. If they were just lightly held opinions and someone expressed something else, we can have an interesting conversation, but we don't feel offended. We don't disown this person because they have some other opinion. It's just, it's of conversational value. But if we really believe that that our opinions are actually true, then suddenly we've taken ownership of them. Right? They're not just an object out in the marketplace. They're actually something that we've consumed, in a sense, purchased, owned, incorporated into our sense of who we are. And there is that identification. Once we've taken them in as something that we own, that we believe, that's actually incorporated in my identity, then it's something to be defended. Defended in the same way that if someone tried to steal my car, I'd do something about it. So the question then becomes, what is it exactly that's claiming ownership of a particular thought or opinion or belief about myself? Because there's something that owns that. There's some belief that it is, and not just an aspect of who I am, but it is essentially who I am, right? If there's a sense of ownership, it is not just an idea floating out on the periphery. It's actually something that defines what I am. And then what is that? What is that grasps that? Grasps onto that, holds that, insists on it, defends it. And then we're starting to get to the heart of this question of identity, this question of what is it that really when I say me or myself, what is it, or mine, what is it that actually is grasping onto that? Right? It can feel really personal. It can feel really justified. This is this sense of ownership. No, I'm entitled to this. I know this is me. I've ingested this idea. So this question of looking at one's identity has very much to do with a sense of ownership of what we've taken to be within whatever we believe I am. Right? And that question of ownership is really at the heart of spirituality. How do I define what I am? And if we're including within that ownership, if we're including ideas and opinions and judgments about other people and beliefs about how I think the world should be and what's fair and right and wrong and all of these conceptual sort of energetic positions, we've sort of included that within the structure of what we take ourselves to be. So when we really start investigating what that is, what is that sort of internal need, demand to sort of bring all of these objects, whether they're thought objects or actual physical objects like a car, might actually define who I think I am. For a lot of people, it does. If not a car, then their career, their appearance, their level of wealth, their race, their religion, their political affiliation. All of that is, if it is allowed, to come within the perimeter of what we take ourselves to be, then it defines us. So it's no longer something that we can use at our convenience. It's something that actually owns us. And so we can look at what is the sort of motivation and the consequences of allowing those objects, again, whether thought or beliefs or opinions or physical objects, the extent to which we allow them to define what we are, and what it is about this sense of self that needs that, in a sense. So that gets us very close to the heart of, what is this? What is this? What's living this life that needs to have those crutches, in a sense? And so we can look at that, because what's being called for in spirituality is to see what is really true, not just what we feel is necessary to achieve some level of comfort and security and ease in that sense. So when we go deeper and start questioning this sense of personal ownership of things that we take ourselves to be, it can get a little squirrely, get a little scary, and even because we're getting to the heart of everything that we take ourselves to be. And one day that will all be taken away, one way or the other, sooner or later. Everything. So there's, whether we dwell on that or not, there's a basis for some, subtle or not so subtle level of anxiety about this life and how to move forward in it. Because what we're holding onto in nearly all cases is something that's not fundamentally true. And we know just like the car can get old and no longer be repairable. Same is true with our appearance and careers and health and so on. And so we can really begin to question what is it that's most fundamental, most essential to living this life. And what we come back to, as we pointed out in the initial lead-in meditation, is that there is this quality of awareness that is present for all of this drama about, how life will play out. How will next week be? Will I get enlightened in my lifetime? Will I be happy? Will I be secure? And so on. And so this sense of awareness is present, whether we're talking about elevated states, or we're talking about mundane, everyday happenings, or even if we're talking about really difficult situations. That awareness is still present, and it's not inflated by having experienced a high state, and it's not diminished by having experienced a contracted state. In that sense, it's like, a classic example is like, the blue sky. A cloud goes by, and the blue sky is still the sky before, during, and after the cloud. It may be obscured by the cloud for a while, but it doesn't eliminate the sky. And when the cloud passes, the sky is unharmed. So similar to that. So we can just, the point of the talk today is to really sense into this quality of what we take ourselves to be, this sense of ownership of not only objects in our life, that's relatively easy, but also ideas and hopes and regrets and dreams and fears and ideologies and beliefs and so on. All of those things that we sort of incorporate into the sense of I. Once they're there, we feel like we have to defend them, protect them. But the awareness itself, the body, there's situations where it does need physical protection, emotional protection. That's not what we're talking about. But the awareness itself is not subject to harm. People disagree. People might not like you. Okay. May not be pleasant, but this capacity of awareness is faithful. It doesn't run away. It doesn't try to control. It doesn't dismiss. Doesn't demand. Doesn't argue. Just present. That's the freedom of it.